Today I want to talk about triggers and how I've coped and how I still cope with triggering situations, people making me angry, and how do I not let it get out of control and consume me, consume my life, consume my loved ones. Because often when we get triggered, we kind of express that anger and frustration and call our friends, call our loved ones. Usually it's our partner, if we've got one, the closest person to us, and it's having an effect. So we are on passing this negative energy from the situation that's just happened to us to our loved ones. It's not serving you, it's not serving your loved ones. Maybe it's a triggering situation with your family members, which is what I often deal with. I come from a culture where there's quite a lot of negativity. It's just ingrained in the culture. Not everybody, but most probably. And I've been like this, I was extremely negative. And if somebody triggered me, I would talk about it for days, sometimes weeks, and tell everybody about it and just carry on talking about this story, holding on to it. And rather than focus on the good in my life, try and find the positivity, try and focus on what I want in my life, I kept giving energy to what I don't want, which was affecting me badly, obviously. And where do triggers come from? Why do we feel angry? So I see life from a completely different perspective these days. If somebody triggers me, first of all, I hold up a mirror, because everybody else is our teacher. I'll talk about it in another episode. I'll hold up a mirror and I think, okay, let's say someone's acting negatively and it's buggering you, so it's pissing you off. I hold up a mirror and ask myself, where am I acting negatively towards other people or myself? Because most of the time you are doing exactly what the person that's triggering you. So we have to take responsibility for what we creating. And it can be a tough pill to swallow. So if I'm getting angry with somebody else, the truth is I am creating that situation, but in order for me to heal, in order for me to focus on what still needs attention within me, often, or most of the time, we focus on other people, pointing fingers, blaming, and of course we're not condoning bad behavior. I have to always repeat it, because people think that the spiritual forgiveness is, forgetting what someone else did, and we have human laws on earth. People have to be kept accountable, but on a spiritual level, we want to let go. We want to let go for us, most of the time, for us to not hold on to this bad energy, anger, resentment for the rest of our life, because before we realize, we blink and we die. Life is very short. Tomorrow is not promised. I don't even know if I'm going to wake up tomorrow. But yet we spend so much energy giving to the negativity, to what we don't want, to an argument we had. I've had a situation in a family today where it just completely blew out of proportions. And I believe I kept my calm. And I'm able to do that because of the tools that I've had, that, the process that I've gone through that allowed me to understand, have more empathy for people, and understand that they're just being triggered. They don't know how to control their emotions, and I can. And if I watched the two people in my family get so angry with each other and so step into victim mentality and shout at each other, and both get so frustrated and lose their cool, lose the control. It's just, and over a small thing. However, obviously there were other issues underneath, because as I said before on another video, if somebody blows up, it's usually not about that particular situation. There's series of different things, especially if you're a mum, you're just overwhelmed, you're busy, you're exhausted, the child's not sleeping, maybe the child's not listening, you doing hundreds of different things, you're the CEO of the house and husband's not helping, blah, 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 all those things, maybe work is stressing you out, and eventually somebody triggers you and you snap and you blow up, and it goes into this big problem, and then you tell everybody about it, call your closest friends. Oh, it's a vicious circle that gets you nowhere. And I can speak about it freely because I've been there before. You got to learn how to stop yourself. You got to learn how to analyze it, how to see clearly what's going on. What's this person showing me in that particular trigger? We're going to get to the root of where did this come from, because that trigger didn't start now. It started in childhood. It carried on into your adulthood. And different people, well, different faces, same person, different face, is just showing you what you still haven't healed. Maybe a childhood wound of being abandoned, a childhood wound of maybe somebody was negative in your life and has programmed you to be negative. Or maybe you were negative in the past and it's now triggering you that somebody else is negative, right? And again, in this situation today, I've set a boundary. I've stayed calm. I've set a boundary. I limit access to me. I help as much as I can. But I set boundaries. And I don't allow myself to lose my cool. I don't allow myself to get so angry that I waste my whole day or a week talking about it. And I know I'm not giving you examples because I'm being respectful to the members of my family. But me understanding where my triggers came from, where it all began, where the father wound, and without blaming the parents, we'll talk about forgiveness in more detail, because the parents only did their best with the tools that they had. They didn't know what they were doing. So how can we blame them? Yes, they might have done something physical, something emotional, like emotional abuse, and we're not condoning that. However, if they were programmed themselves, I'm just touching on that very briefly. If they were programmed themselves, they don't know what they were doing. They didn't know how else to deal with that situation. Maybe they had anger issues. They couldn't control it. Maybe they had that pattern and programming in their own childhood. We forget that our parents were little children once. We forget that they had their own traumas, perhaps even bigger traumas than us. We just see them in that trigger through our own limiting belief, through our own crap, And the process that I've gone through, that really helped me and changed my mindset, changed my life, changed how I see my parents, changed how I see other people, how much more empathy and love I have for other people, even if they are assholes towards me. Again, I set a boundary. Where can I keep people at a distance, but I send them love. And when it comes to triggers, I'm so grateful to all the people that trigger me, because they are my greatest teachers. They are showing me what still needs to be healed within me. Because if I can't control my emotions, my mind is controlling me, not the other way around. You are so powerful, you can control your mind. But yet you're letting your mind control you, your thoughts control you, your emotions control you. I'm not talking about don't cry if you need to cry, because life is hard. Things happened. I cried a lot yesterday because life happens. I've got difficult family situation. But then I have the tools to pick myself back up and carry on with life, not suppressing the feelings, but process them in the way that they don't drag me down, despite the challenges, despite the awful situations. I am able to cope with life. This is how I coped with losing 3 people in my life in 3 months. And my mum being diagnosed with a terminal illness at the same time, and COVID, and all sorts of other things, postnatal depression, and many, many other things. And it helped me cope. It helped me actually find my purpose. Through the biggest pain, I found my purpose. But let's go back to the triggers, because I can now clearly see when people are being so triggered, and I see underneath it. I've even had the conversation with my husband, and he said, because of what you do, because of what you've gone through, what you've learned, you able to step back and see it from another perspective. You see, you know, I have two people fighting and both blaming each other, both speaking through their ego or shouting through their ego because they both want to prove that the other one is wrong and they in the right. And they so focused on being in the right that they can't see that the other person is struggling. Again, boundaries. Boundaries are important. But let's have some more empathy for what the other person is going through and why they might be acting the way they're acting. Maybe they're not coping. You know, for example, if somebody cuts you up on the road, you could be swearing and shouting and getting angry and thinking he's an asshole. What about if that person is walking and, you know, high in the clouds, or somebody just passed away in their life? You don't know that. Maybe they are an asshole, but you don't know that. And we assume the worst. We assume that this person is an asshole, it's an inconvenience to me, he stepped out onto the road, he's cutting me up, how dare he, blah, 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 I don't know, or, you know. But what if you change your mindset? What if you change your perception on life and you trained yourself to, rather than go straight into the negative, to go to the positive, to think of the best possible outcome? Give people the benefit of doubt. Be less angry, be more calmer and controlled and regulated. It's a much easier way to live, much happier. It's exactly how this argument happened today. There were 3 of us involved, and I stayed calm. I stayed calm and controlled and regulated, kept my boundary, or set my boundary, kept my distance as much as I could, offered help, offered a different perception. If the person didn't want to hear it, they didn't want to hear it, I let it go. I send them love, but I remove myself. And I think that's a very powerful place to be. Not powerful. It's just freedom. It's a mental freedom. You know, I'm not allowing anybody else to affect my life, to affect my emotions, to affect how I react. I respond rather than react. And that's how I help my clients. That's, you know, my recent client just walked away from me because she's able to do this on her own. She doesn't need me forever. I said this before. I'm not a therapist. I'm not a psychologist, right? If somebody's deeply depressed, please go and see a professional. But if you go in and see a therapist and let's say you offloading about your problems and, you know, you're not clinically depressed and you're not moving forward, you're not actually getting better with your life, then please go and find another therapist or a coach or a mentor or somebody, because you shouldn't be in therapy for years. You shouldn't be being coached for years. You know, there are coaches out there who want you to be dependent on them. I want you to learn the tools to process what we need to process, change your perception, change your awareness, raise your awareness about, you know, different perspective on life, and then help you change the habits that are not serving you, and off you go. See you later. I'm always here if you need me. However, my aim is that my clients don't need me just after a few months. And because I don't want your money. It's not about money. You know, if it was about money, I would have stayed in my full-time job. It's about doing something that I'm passionate about, that I know changes life, that I know helps in a very short period of time, rather than be going to someone, let's not call it therapist, for years and years and years, just offloading and actually not taking action. My clients take action. My clients achieve results. They move, they make movement. You know, I'm getting distracted now. Apologies, I got a message. My clients are moving forward. I support them, I keep them accountable. They still have to show up for themselves. They still have to do the work, but they keep moving. And they learn how to use those tools and be able to do what I do in terms of keeping myself cool and analyzing the triggers, because triggers will still happen. Even, you know, for me this morning was a trigger initially, but then I was able to calm myself down, bring myself down very quickly, rather than talk about it for a week or so, you know, and consume my energy in a negative way. So it's a much easier, better, more peaceful way to live, to learn how to not allow other people to affect your emotions, affect your energy, how to set boundaries so you keep people at a distance when it is family members, because that's probably the trickiest. You can't always remove them. You know, certain people do remove family members. I choose not to, but I'm able to still keep them in my life, but keep them at a distance and still set a boundary and not allow anyone to trigger me so much. So I hope I've explained briefly about triggers. Obviously, with my clients on a one-on-one basis, we work specifically on your triggers, your specific situations, and we break it down and we go over and over it again and again and again until you get it. And when you get it, you can apply it to every area of your life, you know, which is what happened to my most recent client. In the same way, she was able to apply everything that I taught her into different areas of her life, and her life's completely different. Her mind is completely different. Now she's able to go and help other people and actually give them really valuable advice. You know, it made me very emotional to hear how she was advising another woman who was stuck and she was struggling with being rejected by a guy, you know. But anyway, we'll talk about mother father wound another time. We'll talk about forgiveness, spiritual forgiveness, not standard forgiveness. We'll talk about limiting beliefs more, and talk about manifestation, how I redesigned my life. There's so much more to cover, so stay tuned, subscribe if you like what you're hearing, comment underneath if there's anything that resonated with you, that you found helpful, and that helps me to give you more content that is helpful to you, if that makes sense, because that's what I'm here for. I'm here to share my message, to give you so much free value, because the intuition, the voice in my head that told me to completely turn my life upside down was stronger than anything else. I couldn't stop it. I heard my voice loud and clear, and it was stronger than me. It wasn't about money. It wasn't about me. It was about sharing this message with the world and helping other women and sharing what worked for me, and how I'm able to live a more peaceful, you know, my life is full of challenges, of course, but it's more peaceful, more present life as a mother, as a wife. Right. Let's wait for another episode. I'll see you there.